After all this talk about types of plagiarism and why graduate students copy sources, let's discuss ways that you can write well and avoid plagiarizing your sources in the process. How does WMU require students to handle source text? Well, the WMU student catalogs give explicit guidelines for handling certain textual choices that you may make with regards to your sources. First, direct quotations must be identified by quotation marks or appropriate indentation. Paraphrases, or rewritten summaries of material from your sources, must be accompanied by prompt acknowledgement of the source, meaning a reference, citation, or footnote. Finally, any borrowed facts or information gained in reading or research which is not common knowledge and which did not come out of your own research work must be acknowledged. As far as reusing a significant amount of copyrighted material in your own writing, you must have explicit permission from the rights holder if you use long quotations, or more than a page and a half, survey instruments, tests, or questionnaires, which can be common in the education and psychology fields, pictures, charts, graphs, or cartoons previously published by others. In addition, as stated on page 28 of the university's Guidelines for Preparation of Theses, a copy of each copyright permission letter must be submitted to the graduate college with your thesis or dissertation. So it's not enough to get permission. You must submit those permission letters to the graduate college. This is an important aspect of the thesis dissertation writing process that students don't often realize or pay attention to. Now, why is it a good idea to document your sources? First, it will make it easier for readers to consult them if they are interested in following up on what you've found. Also, you give credit to the original author. You strengthen your argument by showing that your argument is resting on a solid foundation of previous scholarly research. Documenting your sources is also a way of showing that you have mastered the voices of the discipline. In other words, that you can use other people's thoughts to help underpin your own argument. And finally, documenting the sources you've used will help you avoid accusations of plagiarism. When it comes to summarizing or paraphrasing material from your sources, keep the following suggestions in mind. Try to understand the idea as completely as you can. You cannot do an adequate job paraphrasing or summarizing an idea if you do not completely understand it. Pretend you are explaining the idea to someone who has never read about it before. How would you go about doing that? And look at several sources that discuss the idea, not just one, so you could see different alternatives for expressing that same idea. For most scholarly ideas and concepts, there are multiple ways of writing about them. More importantly, though, go beyond just paraphrasing. One professor's take on this process was the following: internalize and spit back out in your own words. Provide your own take on it, a personal reaction, not just paraphrasing. In other words, have opinions of your own. What do you feel about what you are writing about? Be critical of your sources. Interact with them in your writing. When you are writing a literature review, you are not just regurgitating the work of other researchers. Your literature review should be selective. You are selectively highlighting certain researchers and not others to make a point, an argument. But to do this, you have to have an argument to start out with, and this is where I think some graduate students drop the ball. The way composition researcher Diane Pekawari puts it, in the absence of a clear direction for the text, it is easier to integrate material from a source in its original form. The source author's choices will not clash with the objectives of the new text, because those do not exist or are only weakly formulated. In other words, if you don't really know what your argument is, it is much easier to just plop down a block of text from another author and make it fit simply because your own writing is almost non-existent in this context. To continue with her quote, by contrast, the more experienced writer wants to highlight those aspects of the source which are most relevant to the argument in the citing text, and it becomes, therefore, more difficult to adopt the language of the source as well as its ideas. So if you do have a strong argument of your own, You can't just copy a bunch of text from another author and make it fit, because the needs of your argument will require some analysis and shaping of the text and information from your source. My main point in this video is that you should think carefully about what you want to say. There are very few instances in scholarly writing where you really need to paraphrase a whole sentence or a whole paragraph. Usually, you will just need to refer to the base conclusions of someone else's idea or theory, not regurgitate word for word their basic argument. If you find yourself wanting to regurgitate something word for word from a source, stop and ask yourself again, what do I want to say here? Why is this researcher's idea important? How does it fit my argument? What argument am I trying to make? Is repeating most of this author's reasoning in words really the best way to represent this idea? Often, you will find that it is not necessary to repeat an author's argument at length or verbatim. So how can you improve how you work with and synthesize sources so that you do not plagiarize or patch write? Here are some more good tips. First, take handwritten notes. It is harder to copy and paste text from your sources when that text is in your own handwriting. Make sure to explicitly mark text that is from sources with quotation marks and page numbers in your notes. If you respond to that text in your notes, mark your responses so that you can differentiate your thoughts from the source text. You may want to try concept mapping. This can help you work with ideas and less with verbatim quotations from your sources. For example, you can do a concept map by hand, like this example. Writing and drawing relations using lines and lists, clustering concepts together. Or you can create a concept map like this outline in Microsoft Word or some other word processing software, with citations, quotations, and page numbers, plus your own paraphrases of ideas from your sources. In other words, use any method that gets you thinking about your sources at the level of ideas, not at the level of individual sentences and paragraphs from your sources. To the extent that you can get away from seeing your sources as good quotes, you will be less likely to patch write and plagiarize. Now let's also talk about keeping track of your sources, because that can also be a source of frustration and minor plagiarism for students. Use a program like RefWorks or EndNote to manage your citations and your notes about your sources. This will enable you to format your bibliography and keep you from getting overwhelmed with the number of sources you have to deal with. The University Libraries offers the RefWorks software, available from the main library homepage. In addition, there are a number of other products out there on the market, from paid products like EndNote to free software like Mendeley and Zotero. Dr. Rebecca Moore Howard says that successful writing does not come from observing rules, but from repeated, mentored practice. The only way you will get better is to be constantly reading and summarizing sources. View the writing you do for your other classes and the note-taking you do as you read your articles and books as practice for your thesis or dissertation. And find a mentor or several mentors, people whose writing you respect enough to review your summaries. Find exemplary articles and books to read. Ask for recommendations from your advisors. Analyze the structure of the articles and book chapters you read rhetorically. What are the arguments? How are they laid out? This is how you teach yourself to write in your discipline. And finally, trust yourself. It can be relatively easy to find another researcher who can and has expressed the same idea better or more fluently than you. But you have the writing skills you have. You need to have more confidence in your own writing and just need to trust yourself to do the best job you can, even if it is not perfect. You will get better through more practice reading and writing. Students are much more prone to reusing verbatim text from their sources when they lack confidence in their own abilities to write about ideas or past research in their own words. I would like to close this particular video with the following quote by David Bartholomew. It may very well be that some students will need to learn to crudely mimic the distinctive register of academic discourse before they are prepared to actually and legitimately do the work of the discourse, and before they are sophisticated enough with the refinements of tone and gesture to do it with grace or elegance. It will take time and practice before your academic writing sounds truly professional. Hopefully, the more you write, the less likely you will be to depend upon the distinctive phrases of your sources, and the more you will rely upon your own argument to lead you where you need to go.